Hello, YouTube. I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney. On this channel, we answer publicly posted questions from YouTube users getting folks the answers they need from an employment attorney. We have a question here from YouTube user Summer. Summer in the city. Back of my neck getting hot and gritty. Summer asks us, what steps would you take if an employer claims an accommodation is an undue hardship? Excuse me. Specifically, if you ask for something that shouldn't cost them anything. Example, you have a neurodivergent disability which causes difficulty in communication and emotional regulation. You are in an uncomfortable position with your boss and you request that an HR rep sits in on a few one-to-ones to help facilitate conversation between you and your boss if you become overwhelmed. HR comes back and simply says this is an undue hardship and refuses to explain anything beyond that. Okay, so this is, believe it or not, a super common battlefield. And so your point is like, hey, they've already got the HR rep. It doesn't cost them anything. That's mostly true. I mean, listen, that HR rep is going to have to come every time that you feel that you need the HR rep present. And they don't know how often that is. So it is an additional workload for the HR rep that could become significant. But I tend to agree with you. Realistically, it costs them very little. So why then are they fighting you on this? Well, the reason why employers fight this kind of accommodation, and I've seen it happen a bunch of times, is kind of similar to why they fight headache accommodations, migraine accommodations, right? In my career, I once represented a perfectly lovely person who had a migraine condition, legitimate. And I fought tooth and nail to get this person, get her the accommodation she needed for her migraines. And then for the next 5 years, she had migraines only in the morning when she had to work early. That employer was very unhappy because it became very clear that every time this person woke up early, she either had or felt she had or perhaps said she had a migraine. Possibly because she wanted to sleep in. I'm not pointing any fingers, but generally I don't think people tend to have just morning migraines. Listen, somebody's going to be in the chat being like, no, it's a special migraine condition. Okay, maybe. Here, probably not, because all the migraines before the condition was accommodated were at different times of day, as is somewhat common with migraines. They come and go, and part of what's so mystifying about them is their randomness, right? We don't know what causes them, necessarily. We have some ideas, some things that could exacerbate the situation, but, like, it's not like you know when you're going to get a migraine a week ahead of time. Excuse me. And then, once she was accommodated, just all the migraines were for like 8 a.m. shifts. And that sucked for society. Didn't suck for her. She got the accommodation she wanted. She had a great situation. Didn't suck for me. I got paid. Sucked for the employer, and it sucked for society. Because when you abuse an accommodation, it makes employers reluctant to accommodate people in the future. Excuse me. And I'm not saying you would abuse this accommodation, but I'm saying a lot of people before you have. A lot of people before you have said they need an accommodation like this, and then every time they get in trouble and do something really fucked up, they say, I'm overwhelmed. I can't regulate. I need 30 HR reps. Sure, that's probably true. They are probably actually panicking because they did something horrible in the workplace. And so they probably do need to activate the accommodation. I'm actually not saying they're lying. What I'm saying is that it becomes something they do as a safety net. And then because they have this safety net, sometimes, in a few rare cases, people abuse the ever-living fuck out of it. And those people are garbage people. right? So like before you, this employer might have had someone who had a similar accommodation. And that person might have been like, yeah, so I have trouble regulating and I suffer with Tourette's. So I do, I swear sometimes. And like we need, excuse me, an HR referee when I talk to my manager. And then they had a dispute with a coworker and they said something like, I should cut your fucking head off. And the manager said, whoa, come here right now. We need to talk about this. And they're like, I'm not coming anywhere near you. Go get the HR rep. No, you just said you were going to cut somebody's head off. You come here now. No, I have an accommodation. I'm suing you. Did you have an accommodation? Sure. Do I think that the company and the manager should abide by your accommodation? I very much do. Do I think your diagnosis for Tourette's and trouble regulating your emotions lets you say things like, I'm going to cut your fucking head off in the workplace? I sure don't. That's also not really how Tourette's works in my understanding and experience with Tourette's. And also, in my history growing up with people who have difficulties regulating their emotions, gotta tell you, threats of violence are a little bit rare, right? That's not the norm. Listen, can you have a very bad disability in terms of regulating your emotions? You sure can. You sure can. Here's the problem. If your disability is so bad, it's so difficult, so egregious, that you can't stop from making threats of violence, there's a really good chance you also can't stop from acting on threats of violence. Yeah, which means you can't be accommodated. At least not reasonably, right? Like if your thing is, listen, I get real worked up sometimes. I have trouble regulating my emotions. Sometimes I take a swing. Guess what? You're going to have a real hard time in the workforce. Real difficult. And none of this, Summer, I'm saying none of this relates to you. I have no idea. I'm not saying any of this relates to you. But I am saying that employers get weird ideas because a lot of this stuff has happened before. And their attorneys come in and they tell them, listen, we know a little bit how this goes. We've seen issues like this. Like, you do have to accommodate, but like, you might be able to argue. There's a lot of case law to say that that managers need to be able to manage, and you can't need a referee every single time. And a lot of states and a lot of areas of the country, the case law does tend to reflect that because there's been a lot of people who not a lot, there's been a few people who have abused accommodations like this. And in abusing it, they did really egregious, shitty, stupid things and then created really nasty case law that's really bad for people in your position. Now, none of this is to say that I think you're wrong. I think you're right. I think you have a claim. I think you're being reasonable, and I think that you should be able to win this. What I am saying, though, is that you have an uphill battle because the employer no longer thinks with the easy calculus of like, okay, federal law, if I break it, I got to pay lots of money, so I should just do the right thing, right? Instead, what they're thinking about is like, oh, federal law, but it might be cheaper to blow the law and just not do what I'm supposed to do because this person might be like Timmy from 6 years ago who told Cindy he was going to cut her head off and then took a swing at his manager. You, Summer, I'm sure, are not Timmy. And the employer is breaking the law by thinking of you as Timmy. You are not the same people. You're not doing the same things. Your conditions are different and to different degrees. And you're different human beings with different levels of intelligence and capabilities and everything else, right? Different emotional intelligence. Like everything about you is different from Timmy. So the employer is breaking the law, and they're like, oh, this is going to be like Timmy. It doesn't change the fact that you might have a more elongated fight because the employer is going to say things like, it's cheaper to pay and get rid of this person. Sometimes. Sometimes they do that. Excuse me. So, this is a long conversation. Not even a conversation. It's a long monologue where I talk to you about why I think that these specific kinds of accommodations can be difficult to achieve, even though they seem easy to do or provide, but in terms of the employer's perspective, right? Like you're making a great point. All I need is an HR rep present occasionally in certain circumstances. Eminently reasonable. Everything you're saying is reasonable and right and correct under the law. You're doing everything right. I'm just kind of noting that your surprise here in terms of your employer's behavior might be due to some negative behaviors engaged in by people who came before you. And that sucks. A lot. Anyway, Summer, I think you have a claim. I hope you have great success if you have to pursue it. Although I hope you don't have to. I hope you do the right thing. If this was helpful, like, subscribe, comment down below. Helps our channel to grow. Remember, almost everybody works, but not everybody wins. Good luck to you.